Here's a matchup that I actually haven't thought about a ton, to be honest. It's two factions that, well, Vampire Coast counts, I should say. Coast to a lesser extent, but definitely Vampire counts I am known to be a hater of, although maybe a little bit overblown. I don't totally hate them, but they're definitely not my favorite faction by any means. Tzeentch, I actually really like the lore of Tzeentch. They're probably my favorite Monogods faction from kind of a theming perspective. Unfortunately, I don't totally love their playstyle in Total War Warhammer 3. I mean, they're fun, don't get me wrong. It's just not, again, one of my top played factions, so it's actually not a matchup I've thought about a ton. There are some things to consider. Certainly one of them is the omnipresence of magic damage on Tzeentch's roster. Does mean that ethereal units are a no-go at all in this matchup, pretty much. There's no point. And also that means that this unit right here does maybe have a chance to shine, not only because of, well, it doesn't give spell resistance, but does give flaming resistance, which is, of course, another big prevalent component of Tzeentch's army. Lots of things do fire damage, and so the Balefire Corpse Cart can come in handy to help that. Not to mention, of course, gives magic damage to units in the area of effect, which then will help circumvent physical resistance for demonic units, which you probably will see some, maybe not as omnipresent as in Slaanesh, against Slaanesh, I should say. But let's take a look at this build here from Mikil. He's got Vampire Karstein Lord for the flying lockdown effect of the Storm of the Night. He's also got some Vargeist there, a couple of Crypt Horrors, and some Balefire Corpse Carts, two of them. Some Grave Guards here, zombies up front with Skeleton Warriors, Tithe, all ready to take some shots from the pinks as they approach, which they're going to do. Soul Grinder Tzeentch as well. Doom Knights, not the regiment now, just regular Doom Knights. We've got some blues, backed up by Forsaken, a single halberd out on the far flank. Kind of surprised not to see more halberds. I guess maybe they don't trade super efficiently against the Grave Guard great weapons, which maybe you do see in this matchup actually to help combat the Tzeentch halberds, but they're them really teched too heavily into that here. Instead, we're going to see, Balefire Corpse Cart kind of being held up out in the distance. Unfortunately, don't think it's going to be getting any benefit from the Balefire right now in the front line. Could be helping to cut through these blues a little bit quicker. They do have quite a bit of HP, so it is definitely something to try and get through them. But yeah, we see some Flock of Doom as well. A little bit of extra damage potential from the Karstein Lord. Doesn't probably want to be using too much Winds of Magic on Flock of Doom. Maybe save it for the healing, but nonetheless has breath attacks and that Storm of the Night to try and lock down the bird. It's going to be continuing to cackle and fly away. Vargeist drops back line here. Start to mess up these pinks. Knights of Immolation are going to, not the Knights of Immolation, in fact, regular Doom Knight's going to countercharge in, help to shore this up a little bit. Breath attack, gets some contact, and more importantly gets that noxious gas minus reload skill effect, which is probably not super commonly used, at least that particular component of it, but is actually going to affect missile DPS a little bit of the Soul Grinder here. Also, affects his melee attack as well, of course. Let's see, Zombie Dragon continuing to pursue the Exalted Lord of Change. Big, wide melee engagement. The Balefires eventually do get into combat here. Keep in mind, they themselves are a great sort of distraction target for the pinks to shoot out of as well, of course. Their fire resistance does cancel out their fire weakness. They have a net 0. They're a giant regenerating meat bag of hit points that can soak up a lot of damage, potentially. Not really costing too much, and like, if the vampire counts lose it, oh well, you know, not the biggest deal in the world, but definitely getting some benefit from it with that nice magic damage on the Crypt Horrors and being able to cut through those blues even that much quicker. I mean, definitely would have won that engagement regardless, but another blue fire lands there, and I think all three Storm of the Nights have actually been used here. One left remaining, actually, which Karstein Lord hasn't really been able to capitalize super heavily. It has got through the shield and done a little bit of real HP damage, but again, hasn't been able to capitalize on that significantly yet. But there, at least gets a couple of attack animations in. It's like the Vargeist might get up in the air to attempt to surround, but surrounding flying units in the air is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Flying single entities, at least. So, yeah, he is going to be able to escape, as Tzeentch's army ability is going to drop down another bombardment there, hit a little bit of damage, nothing too crazy. But we'll keep a nice wide view as one Balefire Corpse Cart remains. The pinks trying to shoot it down. As the Sternsmen, they have quite a bit to try and grind against. They're somewhat surrounded here by halberds and Forsaken. Not an ideal situation at all. But the Vargeist are going to land for a nice little supporting rear charge here. You can see that the big bird continuing to be chased by the Von Karstein Lord, and slowly but surely the grind is starting to go in the Vampire Count's favor. Of course, that undead leadership is better than demonic leadership, generally. Demonic instability does more damage than undead crumbling, so these zombies and skeletons, despite the fact their leadership has been gone for some time, they're still going to continue bogging things down here, dealing HP damage, dealing vigor damage, and generally causing nuisances for Tzeentch. That being said, the Soul Grinder here has plenty of ammo left. He's going to try and get free to do some good damage. Graveguard there, take a nice blue fire before the Exalted Lord going to continue kiting. But one also big component here is the fact that these Crypt Horrors are relatively healthy. We've got still 15 unit models there. The regeneration can continue on. Of course, Vampire Counts do have the ability to actually straight up heal unit models, right? Resurrects dead combatants there on that spell, so plenty of capacity still to heal. One Crypt Horror is getting pretty low, but the other one is doing just fine. They push on through, get into the pinks, use their mobility a little bit here. Soul Grinder, you can see, just grinding through some zombies, skeletons. As the Vargeist also, maybe, nope, looks like they're gonna switch over to the Soul Grinder there, as Big Bird gets caught in the air once again by the Karstein Lord. Form of the Knight doing some damage, maybe a few attack animations in. We'll kind of keep his health bar up as I peruse the rest of the battlefield. We can see if maybe there's a few chunks. No, looks like not too much damage. So far, he's been able to weather the storm of the night quite well, and hasn't been too impactful. But yeah, these two Crypt Bros, find some Bale coin near you. They're you know, evangelizing their ways against these pinks. Pinks are definitely suffering for it. Does look like Tzeentch, it's been pretty close up until this point, but Tzeentch now getting pretty consistently behind the balanced power, although that was a pretty good shot there. With that blue fire, if the Exalted Lord Chains can keep moving and keep getting a few more shots, maybe leg game, then these halberds can hold out, try and get some work done. A lot of the Vampire Count's units' leadership is quite low, other than Karstein Lord, and I mean, 2v1, maybe the Exalted Lord of Change and the Soul Grinder could beat the Karstein Lord, but it's definitely going to be tough, and it's going to require the Soul Grinder to get through this without taking too much more damage, which the Vargeist are definitely hunting here. See if they can get some value. Soul Grinder's going to stand and fight. You can see the Doom Knights, they're not going to be able to reinforce as they run away due to fear effects. And yeah, the Balefire Corpse card, again, just saturating damage. Hitting the Chaos Halberds to charge them instead of supporting Soul Grinder against the Vargeist. Little Flock of Doom there. Moves the shield. And it's probably going to lead to these units being terror routed once the Karstein Lord drops in. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll keep chasing the Big Bird. Instead, we get the Soul Grinder facing off against the Vargeist. It's actually not fighting them, even. Again, just throwing missiles at the Corpse Card instead, which is definitely big benefit for the Vampire Counts player, excuse me. We're wasting the shots on the Corpse Cart that's going to die anyway to crumbling. But a big Tzeentchian bombardment here will somewhat equalize things. Maybe does some damage to the Soul Grinder as well. Yeah, it takes like a lot of damage during this uptime. Maybe the Crypt Horrors are also getting some pretty good hits, but yeah, it doesn't really help save the Soul Grinder. It does do a lot of damage to what's left of the Vampire Count's army, but it's not going to be enough to save Tzeentch. Whatever AoE damage tricks they can throw down at this point isn't going to be enough to overcome the Karstein Lord. And as a result, foul schemes of Tzeentch will be undone by the even fouler schemes of the vampires. Yes, there it is. So, nice game. Dutch Codex, I believe, is the one who actually posted this replay. I don't know if Mikhail is him actually in-game, but regardless, very fun game from the Vampire Counts, and nice to see them going with just the infantry wave attack here with the MLG distraction balefires. Definitely help do some support, not to mention eat some damage as well. One, Vargeist manages to get some really good value, where both the Crypt Horrors also get some pretty consistent value paying for themselves. Stearnsman, likewise, is able to grind through quite a bit here, and ultimately did a pretty good job in helping to carry this in a pretty big way. Karstein Lord, surprisingly, doesn't get a ton of value, ends up spending a lot of his time and resources chasing Lord of Change, which does limit Lord of Change's value fairly significantly. I do think probably Lord of Metal is going to be better in this matchup, considering it'll do more single target damage to your big, expensive Lord Vampires Lord. I mean, assuming they bring something big and expensive. It's always possible they don't. Relatively rare, but you'd expect, because of the healing of vampire counts, you'd see some inflated values across the board for Tzeentch, which you do a little bit, but yeah, the Forsaken are an interesting pick. One of them ends up paying for themselves, the other two do not. Their defensive stats are not great, but again, I mean, I don't think they trade well with Graveguard great weapons either, but probably better than the Halberds. They probably trade decently enough into a lot of kind of meta vampire counts large units right now, many of which don't have a lot of armor. Tend not to see a lot of knights right now, whether blood or black knights for the vampire counts, because they're not super efficient in a lot of matchups, but it kind of depends on what you want to do. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. If you do like this sort of content, though, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.